Keja, Grantarachima Bhagavatam Keja, Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda Keja, Nitya Gora Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, today we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 8, Manifestation of Brahma from Vishnu. Text 20. Tamasya parividuratma sargam. Tamasya parividuratma sargam. Vichinvato bhutsumaham strinemi. Vichinvato bhutsumaham strinemi. Yodeha bhajam vayam irayana. Yodeha bhajam vayam irayana. Pariksinotya yurachasya heti. Pariksinotya yurachasya heti. Tamasya pare viduratma sargam. Vichinvato bhutsumaham strinemi. Yodeha bhajam vayam irayana. Pariksinotya yurachasya heti. Tamasya pare viduratma sargam. Vichinvato bhutsumaham strinemi. Yodeha bhajam vayam irayana. Pariksinotya yurachasya heti. Tamasi apare. Because of an ignorant way of searching. Vidura, O Vidura, Atmasargam, the cause of his creation. Vichinvataha, while contemplating. Abud, it so became. Sumahan, very great. Trinemihi, time of 3 dimensions. Yaha, which. Dehabhajam, of the embodied. Vayam, fearfulness. Irayanaha, generating. Pariksinoti, diminishing the 100 years. Ayuhu, duration of life. Achasya, of the self-born. Hiti, the wheel of eternal time. Translation by His Divine Grace of Bhaktivedanta Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada Ki Jai. O Vidura, while searching in that way about his existence, Brahma reached his ultimate time, which is the eternal wheel in the hand of Vishnu, and which generates fear in the mind of the living entity, like the fear of death. So I'll read text 21. Tato nivritto apratilapta kama svadishnyamasa punasadeva shanirchita shvasa nivritta chitta nyashidadaruda samadhi yoga. Thereafter, being unable to achieve the desired destination, he retired from such searching and came back again to the top of the lotus, Thus, controlling all objectives, he concentrated his mind on the Supreme Lord. Purport. Samadhi involves concentrating the mind upon the supreme cause of all, even if one is unaware of whether his actual nature is personal, impersonal, or localized. Concentration of the mind on the Supreme is certainly a form of devotional service. To cease from personal sense endeavors and to concentrate on the Supreme Cause is a sign of self-surrender. And when self-surrender is present, that is a sure sign of devotional service. Each and every living entity needs to engage in devotional service to the Lord if he wishes to understand the ultimate cause of his existence. Om Jnana-timirandasya Karananjana Shalakya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadate Svaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamshta Shri Rupam Sakrachatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sachevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parichana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamshta He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshvari Rishabhano Sate Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vancha Kalpatarubhascha Kripa Sindhyava Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhya Vaishnavebhya Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thank you for coming or listening to Srimad Bhagavatam class. So we are in chapter 8, where Vidura starts to answer the numerous inquiries that Maitreya starts to answer the numerous inquiries that Vidura put forth in this 7th chapter. And yesterday Bhavi Bhushan Guru was nicely explaining the context a bit better, because it can be confusing, because after having heard briefly the history that Maitreya Rishi gives about how he got to hear Srimad Bhagavatam from Sankarshan to this kind of disciplic succession from Sankarshan to the four Kumaras to Sankyayana Muni to Parvashara Muni, the spiritual master of Maitreya Rishi. So after that then he started talking about the partial annihilation, and then he switched to what we're hearing now, to the very beginning of creation, of the beginning of the universe, not after a day of Brahma, but at the birth of Lord Brahma, as the title actually indicates, manifestation of Brahma from Vishnu. So, and yesterday Ganesh Prabhu gave me a nice insight on that also, how to understand Maitreya Muni's switching just like that suddenly, like Prabhu you were explaining, like there's no pre-warning, nothing, it just goes from verse to that verse, like he starts talking about the partial annihilation, what's happening at that time at verse 10, and goes till where he describes, like you're saying, how all the living entities merge back to Garbhodakasaya Vishnu with their subtle bodies. So mind, intelligence, false ego is still doesn't die, we know, at the at the time of death of the gross body. So even at Brahma's night, this also still doesn't die. So that we go back along with our mind, intelligence, false ego to Garbhodakasaya Vishnu. And along with that also all our karma and elements in the elements in the subtle state. So we heard that, and then in verse to switch in text. So yes, then he still describes also how then at the end of Brahma's night, so and when his day is about to begin, how all of that takes the shape of a bud of a lotus flower and we can generate it from Garbhodakasaya Vishnu. And 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 by his supreme will it illuminated everything like the sun and dried up the vast waters of devastation. So we know, because during partial annihilation everything gets inundated up to the top four planetary systems, and then it still text 15 further describes that how Garbhodakasha Vishnu entered there as the super soul, and that's where it switches. So here then suddenly in text 15 he mentions how that universal lotus flower, but actually that's not the same lotus flower. Before that he's talking about a bud of a lotus flower where after Brahma's night, which comes, from which forth then come out all the living entities and the elements into the full manifestation, ready for Brahma's recreation is not the right word, right? to create again. Because we know that his service, each day he is doing that, so he's creating all the bodies of the living entities and the lower planetary systems, all of that. So, but now from text 15 and suddenly he was talking on how Lord Brahma gets born from Garbhodakasha Vishnu, when he lies down in the water of his perspiration in the Garbhodaka ocean, that then the lotus flower sprouts out, which contains all the bodies of the living entities and all the 14 planetary systems in their subtle form, which then Lord Brahma is to create by being empowered and enlightened by the Lord, by Garbhodakasha Vishnu. And so in text 15 he's suddenly switching there, and we could think with our material mindset that, well, how is it that he's a great sage, he's a speaker here in Bhagavatam, and it seems he himself gets confused, and so he's just mixing up, like you mentioned also. We hear that then a bit later in the pastime of Varahadev, how he starts off with Shveta Varaha, with the white incarnation of Lord Varaha, which the Lord incarnates in that form at the very beginning of the creation, to when Mother Earth had fallen down into the ocean, and he just picks her up and rescues her in that way. Whereas it happens similarly another time when at the time of Hiranyaksha, when Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, when they exploit the earth, and when she falls down also, and at that time again the sages and everyone prays for the Lord's descent, and he comes then in a red form of a boar incarnation, where he rescues her and where he also kills then Hiranyaksha, obviously. And so Maitreya Rishi there also he switches like that to describe that second incarnation in the same flow. And we might think, well, how is it like first of all, it seems, does he get confused himself? He's a great sage, but then he's just mixing up those things like that. And secondly, he should, we know the whole Bhagavatam and everything, all those great personalities, they actually speak for our benefit, for the fallen souls, to enlighten us, to help us understand the Lord again. So from that perspective also, how can it be that he's almost maybe you could even say deliberately confusing us, rather than helping us to present it in a very easy way for us to understand, appreciate the Lord's pastimes and glories. But obviously that's not the proper way to see it. But we could think like that. But rather, Ganesh Prabhu told me, actually, one main reason is how to see that is that Maitreya Rishi, he's a pure devotee, and so he doesn't narrate it as just as we might do. Okay, yes, we get some, for the Lordship's mercy, Shri Radha Gopinath, we feel some bliss just by talking about him, by being made to talk on Srimad Bhagavatam, but we don't have ecstatic love, that we somehow try with our mind to remember something and repeat something. But pure devotees like Maitreya Rishi, they are absorbed in ecstatic love when they speak Srimad Bhagavatam here to Vidura. And so when he, in those instances, he is simply so excited that he, at that point, he remembers this other, which has some similarities in the pastime, speech, and so he just naturally, it comes out from his heart. He just then has to speak on that, like in the case with Varahadev, perhaps when he's talking about Varahadev and then he remembers, oh wow, how glorious and merciful the Lord is, how he rescued Mother Earth. As the red incarnation not only rescued her, but he also killed this great demon here in Yaksha who was gave such trouble to all the devotees, all the demigods and so forth. So it's in love, in compassion that he speaks and like that. And here in this case, when he thinks about how this bud of the lotus flower comes out at the end of Lord Brahma's night from the body of Kappadakashaya Vishnu to create for Lord Brahma. And then he, naturally it's similar, that he remembers then, also at the very beginning of creation there comes this lotus flower out, and not only lotus flower, but the first being of the universe, which is in our case our, the head of our parampara, Lord Brahma. So and not only this lotus flower, and then directly from that lotus flower, the first being of the universe gets born directly from the Lord. How glorious, how merciful the Lord is. So in such a mood, Maitreya Rishi is remembering this and is narrating it. And also and the Lord, and obviously, I mean, like coming out from speaking from his heart means who is in his heart. I mean, the Lord is in everyone's heart as the super soul, but in a pure devotee, he directly is always in direct contact and gives direct guidance, as we know. Like neophytes like us, we depend on instructions of our spiritual master, of the scriptures. That's why why parampara is so important, as we heard in the beginning of this chapter. But pure devotees, they directly get guided by the Lord as well. And so, yeah, it's the Lord's will. But so why could it be the Lord's will that it's still seem in a seemingly confusing way for us to be that those pastimes are narrated? I was thinking one point is that we have to understand, like Prabhu, you were mentioning about Bhadra Purnima, how amazing also Srimad Bhagavatam is in the sense of that for any person, that any topic he might be interested, you actually can find in Srimad Bhagavatam, like cosmology, science, history, romance, everything. But even though it does contain a lot of history, not just from from the last few hundred or 3,000 years, but from millions of years ago and billions of years ago, like we know Lord Brahma's lifespan is 311 trillion years and 40 million years or something like that. So it's the greatest history that you can, the greatest history book in that sense that you can get. But at the same time, we have to understand it's not like a conventional history book where some historians somehow, according to their imperfect knowledge and intelligence, they compile chronologically some history, one fact after the other. But Bhagavatam, it's not just a book containing facts which have to be chronologically ordered or anything. Srimad Bhagavatam, we know, is Krishna himself in his literary form, Krantaraj, Srimad Bhagavatam, and so the main point of Srimad Bhagavatam is to help us, enlighten us, yes, but not so much in understanding chronologically the whole history perfectly of our planet or of even the universe, whole existence, rather to enlighten us to our original constitutional position as a loving eternal servant of the Lord. And so thus Srimad Bhagavatam is theme-based. And so the most important point which Srimad Bhagavatam is about is love of God, to evoke our love of God. And so that's exhibited also by those pure devotees like Maitreya Rishi here, that he is not worried about perfectly sticking to the chronology and systematically giving knowledge. Most of the time it's pretty much like that anyway, within one pastime. It's just a few occasions like here but where it shows that even more important is love of God, is ecstatic love, which they exhibit here. We see that also several times with Shukadeva Goswami himself, obviously, how he also gets overwhelmed sometimes. But for our benefit, he always controls as much as he can. And yeah, so it was the first point that struck me when I contemplated on the point why Maitreya Rishi is giving it in such a way. And like the whole theme here is actually at this point in the pastime, most striking obviously is that this most intelligent being, the first being of this universe, Lord Brahma, how he, like we're hearing, how he didn't know who he is, what's the world around him, what's his origin, in other words, who's the Lord. And but his very body is made of intelligence, so he's the most intelligent being. And then we heard here how he's climbing down the lotus flower, and Prabhupada made a nice point there that it shows he, in this way obviously, he came nearer to his origin, to Gaupata Kashaya Vishnu, from whom the lotus flower comes, but he couldn't reach him, no matter how hard he tried. So that showed, Prabhupada said, that by one's personal endeavor one may come nearer to the Lord if you inquire into the absolute truth on your own, or on your own endeavor, even by studying scriptures, but you can't reach the Lord. You're depending on the Lord's mercy, on the Lord, devotee's mercy, to really understand the Lord. And so, so that's this striking point how knowledge, real knowledge, it depends on the Lord's mercy, and real knowledge, as we discussed here, is always given out of compassion, out of love, not it's not about understanding the facts. It's about realizing the futility of our endeavors to try to enjoy in this material world, and to rather to surrender to the Lord, as Prabhupada in today's purport points out, this self-surrender, which is necessary to really concentrate the mind on the Supreme, to really go into samadhi, like he's discussing here. And by devotional service, of course, is this surrender. And so real knowledge is spoken in such a way, as out of compassion, and which we see in the whole Bhagavatam. Whereas I was recently listening a bit to, because I got now with my service not much time for reading, but a lot of time for hearing. So I listened a bit about Ramanujacharya, because I remember his Rasamrita Gopur, if you remember, when he was here, he used to sometimes speak something about him, and so I was thinking, it would be nice sometime to hear more, because generally we don't hear, obviously, about saints who outside of our sampradaya, but it's his pastimes are quite amazing, and obviously it's not that we need to go outside of our predecessors, but it just increases our faith even more. Like if you consider that even, like he was living about 1,000 years ago, so before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he's obviously, we know he is the Acharya of the Sri Sampradaya, and so you can say he didn't have the direct, and his disciples and followers, the direct mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as we have it, and what does then further of Srila Prabhupada's mercy. So, but then seeing that even back then, and that they had such amazing qualities and pastimes, shows that, if we are a little sincere, then for us we have even better opportunity, and so it really depends just on our sincerity. But so in that connection about how knowledge is given out of compassion and not of, because the material tendency is that we would, if someone has a lot of knowledge, then he wants to show off. Then if he gives knowledge to someone, then it makes him feel even more proud that I'm instructing you because I know better than you. And there's a few nice pastimes there also with Ramanujacharya, where at one point there was a great scholar who had conquered like practically everyone, all the other scholars in India at that time, but he wasn't in South India before that. Ramanujacharya, he was staying there. I think at that time in Kanchipura, which was the capital, I think, of that area at that time. And so when this scholar came there, first of all, how he came there is like quite amazing. He came there being carried in a palanquin, and this palanquin was carried by all the different great scholars that he had defeated in debate before. So I can imagine, like, real spiritual knowledge is, Krishna explains that the process of knowledge begins with amanitvam, adambitvam, and humility, free from false pride. And whereas someone without devotion, even if he studies all the Vedic scriptures which come from the Lord, but then they become proud, and so much so that the false ego, rather than becoming free from it and thus becoming liberated, realizing our constitutional position as internal servant, the false ego becomes so big that, like, for example, like this scholar allows all the other scholars to carry him on the palanquin. So anyway, so he came in that way, and obviously to challenge Ramanujacharya, and I think he proposed that if he gets defeated, then he would become his disciple of Ramanujacharya. Obviously, he was so confident that he wouldn't get defeated, and then he asked Ramanujacharya, in turn, what will you do if you get defeated? And I think because this scholar, he was also carrying on another palanquin or carriage a load of books, I believe also of the different other scholars he defeated. They also had to give their best scriptures or most dear scriptures to him. And so then Ramanujacharya was suggesting, okay, if I get defeated, then I give you my books. And so then the debate, and also it's interesting, I heard that from His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrita Maharaj, I think. And so he was pointing out also that was back, like nowadays, if you think of debate, then it's mostly just trying to overpower the other person with your points, and you don't care what the other person is saying or anything like that. You might not even listen properly. But in Vedic times, debate means actually that you have to listen to the other person so carefully that you, before putting your argument, then you have to repeat what the other person said, in at least as good as he presented it, or even better. And so it was in a much more cultured way, not shouting at each other, but it was actually in a kind of sport on a subtle level, on the level of logic. And so but this scholar, he was, even though being so proud, he was, in terms of scholarship, he was like really brilliant. So much so that Ramanujacharya was actually struggling. Obviously, it's pastime of the Lord's pure devotees, so was the Lord's will, and to go in that way. And I think they did debate like that for 18 days, which those 18 days they can come in all pastimes, like Charasandra attacking Krishna for 18 times, and so on the 18th day, Ramanujacharya, or I can't remember if it was at the night of the 17th day, and then before starting the 18th time, he went to his worshipable deity there in Kanchipura, to Varadaraj, and from intensely prayed to him that, my dear Lord, I'm not able to defeat this scholar, and obviously a pure devotee, he doesn't do it out of false ego, I want to defeat him. No, I'm not able to defend our pure knowledge, our pure philosophy, Vaishnava philosophy of personalism, because this scholar, obviously, he was a Mayavad, he was speaking on interpreting the scriptures in an impersonal way, but so brilliantly, with logic and word jugglery. So So he was praying, yeah, my dear Lord, if I lose, then it's such a big harm to all the devotees here, to your prestige and everything. And so he prays, and then on the next day, and no, I think actually the Lord directly speaks to him. And yes, the Lord instructs him that, okay, go and study the one particular commentary from Ramanujacharya's predecessor, Yamunacharya. And there you will find all the arguments that you need to defeat the scholar. And so Ramanujacharya does that. All night he studies that, and then again in the morning commence the debate. And actually the scholar, when Ramanujacharya comes, he immediately can see, oh, his whole appearance changed very much, that he was fully effulgent, emanating confidence. And so he was already, just by seeing him, he was actually a bit frightened, thinking, oh wow, had always had the upper hand, but now it looks like he has something, how do you say, up in his sleeve, like he really has something different now to say. And so then obviously he gets defeated, and yeah. So that's one pastime. Another one similar is with one famous disciple, or maybe the most famous disciple of Ramanujacharya is Kuresh, and he had two sons. One son was called, I think, Parashara also, or similar. Can we hear from Parashara Muni? And so he, as a small boy, like when another story of 5-year-old boys. So when he was 5 years old, one time, while he was playing there in the village on the ground, and one great scholar came by, and the boy was on purpose right in the middle of the way so that the scholar could not pass. And so he said, well, why are you, don't you know who I am? I'm this great scholar. I think he's named himself even as Sarvakya, so like the super soul. and so, don't you know who I am? I'm this Sarvakya. All the other scholars, they followed my feet. So, and this boy, he tells him, but I consider all your scholarship, your knowledge, no better than, because he was playing there in the dirt, than the dirt that I'm holding in my hand. And obviously, the scholar was quite taken aback, and he said, oh, is it? So then, sorry, I can't remember exactly how. Does he ask him, or? Yeah, I can't remember if he's urging the boy to put forward a question, or if out of his accord the boy is asking that. In any case, he's asking him that if your knowledge is so great, you're Savakya, so then please tell me, how many grains of sand am I holding in my hand? And then the scholar immediately realizes, oh, actually, I'm so puffed up by my scholarship, but the really all-knowing personality is only the Lord. He is really Savakya, and so and so he actually falls down at the feet of this boy, and so forgiveness, and admits defeat, as being defeated by him, and actually and he surrenders and becomes a Vaishnava. So there's the potency of pure devotees, even some when they're just a little child. And so that's the other hand of those personalities who simply by their intellect try to have spiritual knowledge, try to understand the absolute truth. Whereas in another famous pastime that perhaps all of you know already, but Prabhupada actually many times quotes that as a many times when he also chastises all those people who exploit, especially when different so-called yogis or anyone coming to the West just to make money and live comfortably in sense gratification, then they give some special mantras to persons for some money, and Prabhupada obviously very much condemned that, and sometimes he would quote the famous example of Ramanujacharya, how he freely gave this mantra. And the pastime, it's actually really amazing how it started off by his spiritual master, Mahapurna, instructing him to approach one great saint called Goshtipurna and to learn from him. And so Ramanujacharya does that, but for that I think he has to go from Kanchipurna all the way to Sri Rangam, Rangakshetra, where this saint is residing. And so he walks all the way there, which is quite a big pilgrimage, and knocks on the door of this Goshtipurna, and Goshtipurna is asking, "Who is it?" And he's saying, "It's me, Ramanuja." And Goshtipurna, all he replies is, I don't remember the exact words, but something like, "I'm dead. Come back another time when I'm free." So Ramanujacharya was obviously bewildered, like, what does it mean? Why is he saying like that? I'm dead. I came all the way here, but anyway, he was obviously very humble, and so he went back and tried then another time. And that also, I think it also happened 18 times. That he went all the way there, always the same thing happened. But then, or at the 18th time, then he realizes, well, something, apparently something he doesn't like about what how I'm introducing myself. Or can't remember if he approached his spiritual master or if he realized himself his mistake. I think perhaps he approached his spiritual master. Sorry, I can't remember properly. But he then realizes that, like, because when he comes back after this many times, he's contemplating and thinking, regretting, well, I must be so impure, something so disqualified that he's not even ready to see me, what to speak of, to instruct me, as I was instructed by my spiritual master to approach him for. So and then he realizes, well, I must be full of so much false ego, thinking myself, I'm this great Ramanujacharya. So, then at the 18th time, when he changes, and what does he change it to? He says when Goshtipurna asks, "Who is it?" He says, "I'm the servant of the Lord." And so that time, immediately Goshtipurna is so pleased, and I think he embraces even Ramanujacharya, and then starts to instruct him on very confidential knowledge about teachings of the Alvars, and very confidential instructions he gives him, and he tells him that this knowledge actually no one in this world is qualified to hear. I can see at the moment, this time, here on this planet, I can't see anyone else other than you who is qualified to hear this. And so that's why I told you, but you can't tell it to anyone else. It would, but he did say that whoever hears this, understands this, he will, it's complete for certain that he will go back to God, that he will develop ecstatic love of God. And so like that he instructs him, and Ramanujacharya leaves then. But what does he do when he immediately, as he's walking, he's telling all the people whom he meets that I have great invaluable jewels to give to all of you. Please come all to the temple. And so then he climbs on top of the temple, and there he because among the knowledge also he got one mantra, which is the famous part, which Prabhupada quotes that Ramanujacharya really gave the mantra, even though the spiritual master told him not to give it to anyone. And so he climbs up there and calls out to the people, I'm giving you now this most valuable jewel. If you, whoever hears that, takes it to heart, repeats it, you will become free from all the miseries here in this material world, and you will get ecstatic love of God. And so then he calls out, Om Namo Narayanaya, and 3 times, and all the huge crowd of people is there, who all repeat it, and just by that, by pure devotee, they are calling this mantra and the holy name of the Lord Narayan, and all this mass of people jubilantly repeating it. Just that they created such an atmosphere that all the people there were overwhelmed in love of God. They all forgot their material miseries and everything, and so like that. And so obviously the news spread that someone told them Goshtipurna, and so he was very upset about it. But Ramanujacharya, from his side, he felt so obliged to Goshtipurna that he gave him this knowledge, and among this also this mantra, of which can liberate all these suffering people and give them love of God, and that he was able now to give it to them. And so he went back to him because he wanted to thank his guru. But obviously when Goshtipurna saw him, he became furious, and he scolded him that first he said actually immediately that, go out of here, I never want to see you again, never again. And then he tells him that, I told you that this was most confidential, it was not meant to be given to anyone who is not qualified, and now you've given it to all these people, and so for that you will have to suffer in hell perpetually. And Ramanujacharya, he very humbly begs pardon and tells him, I know I shouldn't have done, but at the same time, you told me that whoever chants this becomes liberated and gets love of God, and I see all these people are suffering, especially in this age of Kali Yuga here. So I can't bear them suffering, and if you say that it's only like for one insignificant living being like myself who has to suffer perpetually in hell, but just by doing that all the others can become liberated and eternally happy in the spiritual world, then that's worth it, then I have to do that. And upon hearing this, obviously Goshtipurna, he sheds tears, embraces Ramanuja and says, oh, actually, you're not my disciple, I'm your disciple, you're the real Acharya, that's the real mood of a devotee, that's the real will and mood of the Supreme Lord. So, so that shows so beautifully how real knowledge is nothing complete opposite of pride, but it's in full humility, dependence on the Lord, and it's in fully to fulfill the Lord's wish of His unlimited compassion upon all the living beings, to give up their foolish attempts to so-called enjoy in this material world and accept His unconditional love. And in that way, knowledge is coming down in the parampara and given by the acharyas and the pure devotees. And like Prabhupada discusses in this purport about this first self-surrender, that it's all, so that's why, as we discussed previously, Bhagavatam, it's not perfectly in chronology, and sometimes might seem confusing here, but we have to understand the point that it's about giving love, and not which doesn't mean that we might take advantage of that and just act whimsically and say, well, I just do what I feel in my heart. No, as we discussed, we are not qualified to be directly guided all perfectly by the Super Soul. We depend on the instructions of Shastra and of the devotees of Guru. But Bhagavatam itself is all perfect in giving us pure love of Godhead. So, I'll end here. If there's any comment, question. Grantarachima Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.